welcome to our council meeting this morning. Welcome to the public and those that are coming to hear from submissions that they've made, and to those that are watching online. Could I remind councillors to keep their phones away from you?
Yep.
And we'll take a break, and please signal if anyone needs to have that break. I'll signal accordingly at the right time. And could I ask Councillor Kumar please to open our meeting?
Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge, send thy blessing upon us, your servants, this day, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of the Rotorua district. May we be tolerant in ourselves at all times. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen.
Thank you. And now I call for any apologies.
$11:30 or something, so we can go
We'll
to the
signal
funeral in Ohinamatu.
Aye. Thank you. Any other? Councillor Gold?
If the meeting goes out to 11:45, I have to leave 11:45.
Thank you. And I'm signalling that at 10 o'clock, Deputy Dave Donaldson will come into the chair as I take a call about trends. Yes. Yeah. I think we'll all understand that from staff. Two tangi down at Tamatakapua and Tunahopu today, so very, very sad for the community. Right, or we don't have to accept any apologies, it's really notices of having to leave early. So are there any declarations of interest? There to be none. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda? Appear to be none. Sorry for my rattling. One issue that I have, it's not an urgent item, but I'll take the authority to just let you know that we're getting requests to support remits, and so UNA's put in place a process that all remits that are coming from other councils, for those that are going to attend conference, they'll be round robined for you to read, to give support in principle, and we'll bring them back to a council meeting prior to the conference so that you are involved in that process. Is that right, Una? Great, thank you. So we now go to the council minutes on the 28th of March 2019. There are a few minutes. The first are on page 8. It's for the council meeting held on the 28th of March, to be confirmed as a true and accurate record. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor God. Seconded, Councillor Kent. All those in favour, please say aye. The next are the minutes of the council hearing on the Rotorua sewage scheme, held on the 10th of April, be confirmed as a true and accurate record. Moved Councillor Bentley, seconded Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour? Contrary? Carried. And the minutes of the council meeting on the 11th of April be confirmed as a true and accurate record. That was the annual plan. Moved Councillor Rotorua, seconded Councillor Gould. Are there any corrections to any of those? I'll put the vote, the motion as 1. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. And now page 20, release of confidential items. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive? Thank you, Councillor Sturt, seconded. Councillor Hunt. All those in favour, please say aye. Councillor Sturt, you wish to comment?
Yeah, Madam Chair, as the mover of the motion, I just want to advised the community that this was held in confidential, and that I understand and in question, because Councillor Donaldson didn't take part in the discussion or in the vote, a full report comes back to my committee on the operational side and a wash-up of Crankworks 2019, and that comes through the committee process, and maybe Una would be available, would ratify whether that is the case.
Councillor Donaldson?
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Declaring an interest as a director of Mountain Bike Events Limited, but just to respond to Councillor Sturt, we have a board meeting next week for Mountain Bike Events Limited, and then under the shareholder agreement we're required to have an AGM within 30 days. I'm proposing to the board that AGM will be late July, and that we will bring a report to Ops and Monitoring on the 1st of August.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Kent?
Thank you, Your Worship. Since this is a release of minutes, I believe it should also show those councillors who voted against this decision and requested their votes to be recorded. So, just releasing the minutes without those who voted against it being recorded is not a correct minute of the meeting.
I agree that we should put that accordingly, so that should be noted before release. Thank you. Now we move to recommendations from other committees, page 23. I just need a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Moved Councillor Sturt, seconded Councillor Rotorua Tate. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. And now we'll move through them separately. A mover and a seconder for the motion that the following recommendations of the Operations and Monitoring Committee held on the 4th of April be adopted. The first, you move, thank you. You move, seconder, Councillor Gould. So the first recommendation is open for discussion. That's that Council approves the general functionality of the CBD transport network be reviewed, and that the green corridor be demobilised as soon as practicable. It's open for discussion. Yes, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we can just change the wording on that green door to green corridor.
We have, if you note up on the screen, that had been noted. Thank you for that, though. Made you feel like singing Green Door. Councillor Sturt?
Chair, in view of the public comment that has been swirling around in the newspaper, I think it's appropriate that we do look at the review of the functionality of the CBD network, which could include the removal or the demobilisation of the green door. We've asked that be removed as soon as possible. But this green corridor that is the part that's actually in the inner part of the CBD. The connectivity of the cycleways, which the green door connect with the Kurau Park and connect eventually through to Sulphur Point, that facility will still be available for cyclists in a safe manner. It's just that the configuration of the green corridor as we know it today, it is envisaged that would be demobilised. But can I have an assurance that cyclists will still, because there is still people who use the green corridors, contrary to myth that no one uses it, it's a load of rubbish, because on the weekend I saw 18 groups cycling through the CBD from Kurau Park going to Sulphur Point. So I just wondered whether that safety aspect of cyclists through the CBD, connecting those two cycleways, will be retained.
Better that Stavros answer that. Stavros?
Good morning, Morena. Through you, Your Worship. Yes, obviously, if you're going to do a review of the general functionality of the CBD transport network, one of the fundamental requirements of that review is to ensure safe and safe access for all modes of transport through the CBD. If that review identifies that certain parts of the corridor might require to be retained or not, obviously we will make a decision upon that review. But the fundamental requirement is to maintain accessibility in a safe and practical way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any other discussion? Councillor Kent?
Thank you, Your Worship. In addition to just the general functionality of the CBD transport network, I wonder whether you should also include a review of the parking in the CBD. I think that should be part of the transport network review, and I think it should be stated as such.
We did make that quite clear, that it included the whole movement, the speeds, the parking, yeah.
As long as that's understood, I have no further issue.
That was understood. Could you confirm that, Stavros, that that's the review of functionality?
I will.
Pardon? Yes. I will.
Will, thank you.
I do.
I do.
Thank you. So it's understood. Thank you. Any further discussion? Yes, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and apologies for my slight lateness. I don't want to go over the vast amount of conversation we had about this in the committee, but I do just want to highlight that since the Green Corridor, we've had 26 kilometres of new shared path network, and we were given that update by the Safer Journeys team. So I do think that in every way this Green Corridor has served its purpose in creating safer transport options, including cycling. And I just want to support it, but perhaps also just clarify whether the cost of removing it will be given to council before we do go ahead with that works, just to be prudent so there's no surprises for the council or for the community.
Good point. I'd also like to add that most of the discussion seems to have focused around about 2 kilometres, and as you say, 26 kilometres has now been added with an incredible uptake because of the Skyway connectivity program. So it has been a stunning success in my view when you see people out and about. But that will all be included in part of the functionality review. And the other aspect that I think has been overlooked is that we had no east-west connectivity when we began the whole Skyway network. Now, with Amaho Street and NZTA planning, and with the lakefront, we get the east-west axiom, and that seems to have been overlooked in some of the public discussion. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm glad, as far as what I've listened to from the public and from the business district in the CBD, that this green corridor is finally going. I mean, we live in the same Rotorua, but we see
Review of functionality includes whether or not this needs to be the east-west axiom. No one said it's going. A report will come back to us, and that's the basic misunderstanding that a lot of the community conversation has arisen from. We called for a review of the functionality. They will bring back a report to us about what is the future status of that corridor. So we must correct the record, because there's misinformation out there in the public and it's generating some rather odd assumptions. Carry on.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Oh well, then I'll report as to what I want to say when that review comes in. And I believe I'll probably thumping on the same thing. But thank you so much.
Nobody needs to thump on anything, Councillor Kumar. We make the decisions collectively as a council, as we did in the beginning. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When have we got a date for when this report is going to be tabled?
We haven't. We heard it would come back. It's quite an extensive review. I think it's inputs required into doing a review of the functionality, including speeding and all of those components that we want. I think it's got to be done thoroughly, extensively, and involve the community, and I expect it back before this session of this term of this council rises. We've got to make that decision. But I wouldn't put a date on it. Would that be right?
Your Worship, if I could say, is that it's quite important for the elected members to be informed that on the 8th of this month, there's an open day discussed for the public and the community to be familiarized and discuss the proposed revocation of the State Highway 38 in Amo House Street, Sala to Old Tapo Road. That corridor anticipates the creation of shared walking cycling paths all the way from Sala to Old Tapo Road, and also anticipates changes to speed limits and the general operating environment of that whole corridor. Until we finalize the design with NZTA and the concept of that, then obviously the flow and effect on the CBD has to be aligned with that kind of decision. So I will wait until I see the outcome of that final design, and then I will chart a proposed time frame to review CBD, parking, speed limits, functionality, and the future of the Green Corridor, and advise the councillors in due course. But before I have that information, I cannot give you a specific time frame at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, all those in favour of recommendation 1?
Chair?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. In view of that, then the wording of what we've got there is not correct.
Is the as
Perhaps
soon
we
as
should actually
practicable.
delete and that the Green Corridor be demobilised as soon as practical.
Yep. Recommendation, Charles.
I think that we should say that Council approves the general functionality of the CB transport network be reviewed, including the Green Corridor.
That's right.
Full stop.
That's right.
Are you happy with that, Mark?
Good.
Yep.
So as amended, we'll read that out. And that does make it very clear.
Including the Green Corridor, full stop. And speaking to that, Madam Chair, in what Stavros says, it makes sense that we do wait for the other linkages that he's talked about that are going to occur before he even attempts to write up a review. So, and because the impact may be, there may be flow-on effects which will take care of a possible demobilising of the Green Corridor on another platform in another area. So I look forward to that report. So thank you.
Thank you for the proposed amendment. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. We move now to the following recommendation of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Policy Committee on the 11th of April 2019 be adopted. A mover and a seconder for recommendation 2, the election and communications protocols for elected members. Moved, Councillor Rokawa-Tate. Seconded, Councillor Hunt. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, I should have opened up for discussion if there is any discussion. Appears to be no discussion, so we've moved and seconded and voted. All those in favour, and they have. So we move now to the recommendation 3, the assessment of water and sanitary services. That's attachment 2 in your order paper. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Seconded, Councillor Hunt. The motion is open for discussion on the paper. Is there any discussion? There appears to be none. I put the motion to the vote. Oh, yes, one question.
On page 51, just get it, hang on. Sorry, hang on. On page 51, there's a list of
Premises.
No, there's a list, at the end of a list of premises and communities detailing that they have that we have no idea of what the whether they've got any treatment except the Waikiri Pools and Camping Ground, which we own, of course. And it's got, in that column, it says the MOH register. May I ask, through you, Madam Chair, to Stavros, will that eventually be known? Have we got a responsibility under the Public Health Act to know about these private schemes and what type of treatment, etc., and whether they're registered or not with the MOH, and what do these private owners of water supplies actually have to do to become registered with the Ministry of Health, and are they aware of their responsibilities with that? Because I don't want any comeback like what happened in Hastings. Even though testing was done, there was an implication that the council was fully responsible, and these are private schemes, I know, where that was more a public scheme. So I just want to make sure that we're the risks to us being held accountable because the water supply is not treated, etc., and the public know that, so there's no comeback on us. I'd just be interested in the response.
You want clarification?
Through you, Your Worship, as I noted in the presentation of this report, the current statutory framework is that we are responsible as a water supplying authority. That's our responsibilities. Where private water supplies are in effect, we do not have a responsibility for the quality of water. However, if you would recall that I've said that by July this year, we expect a regulatory framework to be proposed by the government that possibly will put us in a different statutory environment, post that government policy statements. Without wanting to anticipate that regulatory environment, I assume that local authorities will be asked to play a far more active role and responsible role in monitoring the quality of waters in those, in those private, supply arrangements. But I want to emphasize this is my impression. Until I get that regulatory proposal, I cannot be certain about it. Thank you.
Just further to that, I thought that was coming, Stavros, because a lot of these places that are listed here, the public have access to them, so there should be some safeguards in terms of risk for the public, like there's the Okataina Lodge, Waitapu Tavern, Landing Cafe, etc., etc., etc. So I just wonder, so you're assuming that we may have a role in making sure that they comply and are treated appropriately. Thank you.
Any further? Yes, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I have some clarification, please? If on page 45, it states there that Mamaku has both chlorine disinfection and UV disinfection. If that is the case, why is it not compliant with protozoa? The same with Hamarana. Further down the page.
Stavros, you can answer that.
I think just quite important to clarify that at the time of doing the assessment of the water quality, especially with regards to protozoa, it was prior to the UV and installation. And now, if you recall, we reported the UV installation was completed a couple of months ago, and obviously going forward that will be no longer the case.
Can I suggest then that perhaps a note needs to go at the bottom of that table stating the fact that the failure to comply with protozoa was before the installation of UV. Mamaku, just to clarify that.
Can be done, thank you.
I do think that's a very good suggestion. We're all very, very cautious about water and potable water and what the regulatory environment that may occur, what impact it will have on us as a council. And the bottom line, we're well aware of that. Right, all those in favour of the paper, the report, attachment 2, you say aye. Contrary? Carried, as amended. Staff reports now. We've got the Recommendation 1, the adoption of the Rotorua Council Traffic Bylaw, page 76. Do I have a mover that it be received? Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Hunt, and Henry is coming to the table. Thank you. You're speaking to it.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, and kia ora koutou councillors.
And Nevin, sorry, I should have
Yep.
introduced you.
I was going to say, I don't think Nevin needs much introduction, but yeah, it's good to have Nevin here. So we've just got a couple of slides really which are designed to really remind you of where we got to with this prior to public notification. This was discussed by councillors before we went out publicly. Nothing's changed from there, but given it was a couple of months ago, Nevin will take you through what it contains and what it's designed to do. But before I hand on to Nevin, also just an apology from me for managing to put the wrong attachment 2 into the agenda. So it doesn't affect the recommendation, which is about adopting attachment 1, but attachment 2 was supposed to be the track change version, which would have made it a lot easier for you to go through. So you've now got a copy of that track change version, and it was the same track change version you saw a couple of months ago, but just apologies for that. Now I'll just hand over to Nevin.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to adopt the traffic bylaw, as Henry has mentioned to you. Just a couple of key points for your information. So this went out to public consultation. 45 people did review the consultation documents online. Of those, 9 downloaded the documentation and looked through Council's Kurumai Let's Talk portal, and the consultation period ended on the 1st of April. At that time, we have had no submissions from anybody in the public or our partner agencies. So there was really only 5 key areas that we changed within the current bylaw that you had in force. One was to update the legal provisions in the bylaw, and those that they are made under. The Land Transport Act has been quite a complicated piece of legislation, and through drafting errors that were made, they had to keep the old 62 legislation in place and the new parts, and the old 74 Local Government Act and the new 2002 Local Government Act. So it's just tidying all those little bits up, including the update of the penalties. The main focus is to allow for the new pay-by-plate system that we've implemented. So in the old bylaw, you had the pay and display component. So if you think of the old blue machines where you went there, you paid for your parking, you got a receipt, you had to go back to your vehicle and you had to display that. That's been now replaced by pay-by-plate. You go to the machine, enter your plate, pay for your parking and walk away. So we needed those wording changes. The third component was to allow for contractor parking in a new way. So in the old system, contractors would come into the council, pay their money, get a meter hood, which they would then put over the single head meters. In the new system, of course, all the single head meters have disappeared from town, so we've had to go to an electronic version of doing that, so that when the enforcement staff are on the street and they come across a vehicle that looks like it should be having a contractor parking, they will know that that's done. The fourth component was the removal of a conflict with the Freedom of Camping Act. So we said that people could sleep in their caravans on the road, and then we said that we put some restrictions in that, which was obviously how we managed it in the older days, but when the Freedom of Camping Act came in, it stated that you had to have a bylaw to do that. So again, it was removing that conflict that was in there. And then there were some minor spelling and wording corrections that our solicitors made as they worked through the document. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nevin. So I have first question, Councillor Sturt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nevin, under Part 5, under miscellaneous, and I noticed that people, if they breach the provisions of the bylaw, can be fined up to $20,000 of an offence against the provisions of this bylaw made under Part 8, and up to $1,000 under Section 222AB of the Land Transport Act 1998. One of the things I get a lot of inquiries about is the parking of heavy vehicles in residential areas up on council verges. So the question I have is, when a member of the public sees this happening and they report possible damage to council infrastructure, i.e. the footpath, the verge, and all the underground services, who's the one that enforces the provision of 16.1, which says no person shall stop or park any heavy vehicle for more than 1 hour in any public place? And then there is another provision in here where they are not allowed to park a vehicle on a council verge and are subject to fine. So who's going to enforce that? Have we got people specifically warranted and designated to this? And do members of the public, there's a few questions, Mr. Chair, and do members of the public report this, and do we have staff available to go out and inspect this? Do you give a warning for the first offence and then follow that up if it carries on? Because it's often in a residential area.
Thank you, Councillor Sturt. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do have staff available for that. Our contractors and our own staff are currently warranted to deal with all the provisions of the bylaw, and they aren't new provisions. We deal with them now. There is a cut-over between the rules and the district plan, and so that's picked up by our RMA compliance team. And yes, we always go out and we work with the people first, so we try to educate. Where education fails, we will go to enforcement, whether that be an infringement or whether that be an abatement notice under the RMA for them, just depending which area it sits in, because some people with their heavy vehicles are running businesses contrary to the zone that they're in. So we investigate every complaint that comes in.
Just one further follow-up question, if I may, Mr. Chair. So who is responsible? It's under 3413, stops or parks or permits the stopping or parking of any vehicle on any footpath or verge. So who's responsible? Is it the driver or the owner of the vehicle? That's the other grey area that many people, you ring up a local logging truck, you say, it's got nothing to do with me, trying to help, it's the driver. So I wonder, who do you enforce the abatement with?
The abatement is issued like the infringements to the owner of the vehicle. So again, that's an employment issue, and our local firms are usually pretty good. They have yards of their own, and they aren't aware that their staff may be parking their trucks in those areas, and usually a nice talk between the boss and the driver of the vehicle resolves that issue. For the out-of-town firms, we do write to them because we don't know who the driver is. We just know that it's registered to X firm, and we write to them and say, are you aware that you can't park there? There is parking areas that they can go to. So there are some yards like down Vaughan Road that provide services for out-of-town trucks to use, and we focus them on moving them to those areas.
Thank you, Nevin. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to raise an issue that I raised when we were going through this before that seems to have been overlooked, and it's to do with that 60.1 parking of heavy motor vehicles. We've got a conflict with the district plan because the district plan has been amended so that it also includes provision to prevent the parking of heavy vehicle trailers. Now, under the heavy motor vehicle definition on page 81, it says it has the same meaning as the Land Transport Act 1998. That does not include trailers in the definition under the Land Transport Act. So we need to actually amend 16 and 16.1 headings to also include heavy motor vehicle trailers. because they are not heavy motor vehicles under the definition under the Act.
Henry, did you want to, or Nevin, comment on that, or?
Yes, we will add that into 16.1. Thank you. I wasn't aware that that had been raised because I wasn't at the last meeting. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you, Niven, for your report. For the people listening, the question relates to page 84 in the old agenda, but it relates to, in the documents given us today, 7.1.1, 7.1.2. I shall read them out. Every day of the week except Sundays and public holidays and between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. on these days. Does that mean enforcement is done up until 10 o'clock at night, Monday to Saturday, but not Sunday?
I believe I asked this question in the committee, Henry, but perhaps if you could respond to Councillor Gould.
Thanks, Mr Chair, and through you, and again, Nevin can jump in behind me. Essentially, this is an enabling provision. It's up to the council where it sets the policy within those hours. So this isn't a clause that declares it to be those hours. It enables the council to set its policy between those hours, and we don't enforce up to 10 o'clock. The council policy isn't that.
Follow-up question, Mr Chair. Does that mean the law at the moment means Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 5 o'clock or 5:30, and Saturday from 9 until 2 o'clock?
Yeah, I think, Henry, it'd be useful just for transparency. What is the current policy for enforcement, please?
Council's current policy is from Monday to Friday 9 till 5, Saturday 9 till 12 for enforcement in the street. That was the decision of this council.
Councillor Stewart?
7.1 is quite clear. It says, except where signs relating to those metered spaces indicates otherwise. So you do have the provision under this bylaw to enforce parking infringement between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. But if you put a sign up to say the hours, like if there's an event at the stadium, say for the Lions or the Springboks or someone like that, and you put a sign up saying parking excluded between these hours, and people park on the verge, that enables you to put an infringement on there. Is that the correct understanding?
Yeah, that's correct.
We used to note it on the meters, didn't we?
It's correct. This is a provision which gives the council the power. How the council exercises the power will come through its policy.
Thank you, Henry. Councillor Kent, you had another question.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Just to ask whether, in fact, the new parking meters actually state those time limits on, so that people actually know when they should or should not put money in the machine.
Through you, Mr Chair, yes, the machines do, and they won't take money for periods outside of council's approved hours.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Mr Chair. With this revised parking that we've brought into place at the moment on the lake end of Te Tanako Street, and I have asked this question before, there used to be P15s, 4 P15s, which were outside the stationery shop and Cottage Flare. Now that's been reduced to 2. Is there a reason for that, or is it's perceived that it's just revenue gathering, but is there a reason why you cut it out and that the purpose of the shops haven't changed?
So I understand that's a separate issue to the bylaw, but perhaps if you could explain, please.
Well, thank you, Mr Chair. Through the process we worked when we were rejigging the actual signage, we actually talked to the businesses, and we definitely talked to the stationery shop, because we originally were going to remove them and Cottage Flare, and we reduced those down from 4 to 2. But like the rest of the parking, we are prepared to work through the city, and where issues have arisen, we have addressed those issues. So we're originally going to remove the P15s completely from that area.
Karen, Councillor Hunt, sorry.
Thank you, Nevin. When we last put this out, did we get any submissions in your memory? Is this something that people normally submit on, or do you believe that the lack of submissions is indicative of the fact that we've pretty much hit the right spot in the community of those that actually looked online?
I think in previous bylaws, when we have reviewed them, the submissions we've got have really been around the when the cycleways were added to the shared paths were added to the bylaw to make that available to that. The rest of it is pretty mundane parking issues, and our partner agencies in the community go, we need this to keep these things ticking over, and they usually don't make any submissions on those issues.
Are there any further questions? Well, we have a mover and a seconder. I'm now going to put the motion that the council adopts the Rotorua District Council Traffic Bylaw 2018 as attached, and that the council sets the date that the bylaw comes into force as the 3rd of May, or as amended, with a slight amendment. Thank you. Sorry, I've missed that. Councillor Kent?
Should we actually amend the title to 2019?
Yes. Thank you. There seems to be, it's an existing bylaw. Yeah. Can you even clarify?
It's just for information, so all our precedent codes and that run by the year on and that. And so if we changed it at this stage, we would then have to change all our precedent codes with the courts behind the system.
We get it. That's why you're there and we're here. Thank you. All those in favour? I'll put them...
Sorry, Madam Chair, just if we could capture in the, I think it may be coming, is it, in number 2, capturing the amendment that was agreed?
As amended. It was coming, you were getting there. We'll finish, don't rush. As amended.
So, Your Worship, just for your benefit, as you were out of the room, Councillor Kent noted that the that heavy trailers were not part of the and needed to be added into the section for heavy vehicle parking.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, probably my preference would be to actually refer specifically to it, the 16.1, the as amended to clause 16.1.
Made it specific about heavy trailers. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. So I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. We move now to recommendation 2. Before we get to that, is anybody needing a break? Carry on. Right, thank you. Recommendation 2, the deliberations report. East Rotorua, Rotorua sewage scheme objections to install a step system within properties at Lake Rotorua, page 109. Do I have a mover to receive the report? Councillor Rowe-Kawatate. Seconded, Councillor Donaldson. Right, now we're going to have the deliberation report. Oh, well, there's another part to that. Oh no, we just receive them. Thank you, Stavros.
What presentation, Isa?
We'll wait till it comes out.
Okay, Good morning, everyone. Just a very quick background to the wastewater reticulation scheme for covering Rotorua and Lakes Rotorua and Rotoiti. The map in front of you just highlights the benefit areas, from to the east, from Rotorua all the way to Rotoiti, where we have the red dot, where is a wastewater treatment plant above on Haumingi 9B, 3B site. And as we're progressing the project, you gradually see the whole area being reticulated and the wastewater treated, through the single waste treatment plant, as it was a recommendation from the beginning. With regards to to the installation of step systems, or what we call septic tank effluent pumping systems onto the community in Rotorua. The legislative framework says that once who have the resource consents and the system of pretreatment has been decided through that legislative framework of the resource consent, a step system was defined to be installed for the community of Rotorua. In order to achieve that, under the Local Government Act, a specific section 181, council is able to install such systems on the private property. However, that is subject to a number of conditions, and these conditions are governed more precisely by Schedule 12 of the Local Government Act, which basically says that we need to tell the property owner what's going to be installed, where it's going to be installed, and timing, and the related logistics behind that. And where property owners have an objection, they are entitled to raise an objection to the installation of the system, and the council, having received those objections through a hearing process, can make a decision going forward. That decision for the council is now in front of you today, and that's the purpose of this report here. And I think it's quite important to summarize that the purpose of the hearing was to give objectors an opportunity to present their case to the council. And also want to emphasize the council's decision today is limited to either to abandon the works proposed, either not the scheme, but the installation of the step system on each individual property, to proceed, or to amend the works proposed. The works proposed, as I said, is the installation of the step pre-treatment system on each property. The objectors' broad themes were canvassed in this table here. One related to the need for the scheme. I think suffice to say that the need of the scheme has been explored for a number of years, been technically assessed by a whole range of technical experts, and the community made a recommendation to this council a few years back for the scheme to proceed through the Rotorua steering community group. One of the fundamental evidence that the scheme enjoys the support of both local community and relative authorities is that the scheme enjoys funding support from the Ministry of Health, the Ministry for the Environment, the Regional Council, our council, and obviously those significant investments would comprise roughly 2/3 of the total cost of the scheme would not have been made unless a technical validation of the reason for the scheme has been established through the investigation processes. The capital cost of the scheme is a key issue for each individual ratepayer, and obviously council, in progressing the scheme, has arrived at an estimate back in 2016-17, and that estimate has been communicated through the annual plan of 17-18. And through that process, the council was able to identify the overall projected capital cost of the scheme and the individual net cost to each individual ratepayer. Next one. Again, there are some concerns about the cost of the operations and maintenance of the scheme and the individual side issues. I think the two areas there is that because the scheme has been identified as a holistic scheme for Rotoiti and Rotorua with a single treatment process, it's treated as one single scheme. However, the ongoing maintenance cost of the scheme will be incorporated into the wider community as a targeted levy. And often the concern is raised as to why people who live in Rotorua should be contributing the targeted levy that is paid for wastewater systems for Rotorua City, for example. The reality is that if we incorporated the operational cost of the scheme of Rotorua to be paid only by the residents of Rotorua and Rotorua, their targeted levy will be around about $1,800 a year. Because they've been absorbed by the entire district, the targeted levy is reduced to about $450 a year. So obviously that provides economies of scale. With regards to the capital cost of the scheme, obviously the Council's funding and policy, funding and revenue policy made a decision that in order to alleviate future debt levels, it's important the net cost to be funded by individual ratepayer instead of being funded by the entire community. And that's a decision made by the Council through the LTP. Outside of individual side issues, obviously every property has its unique characteristics, and there are always going to be some geometrics and some boundary issues that we work on a property by property basis to address as we go through. And again, the issue was raised during the objections and the submissions that the Council is not a registered financial entity under the financial services. However, the Council is not acting in that capacity. Council's resolutions was to incur the capital costs or the net capital cost of the scheme and then seek to recover those net capital costs, including the interest cost of that capital from the ratepayers benefiting from the scheme. So the Council is not acting as a financier. The Council simply applies the Rating Act to recover costs incurred through the installation of that system. Having received the objections and read the core themes of the submissions, this report recommendations remain that as outlined above. The need for the scheme has been established. The capital cost of the scheme has been estimated, and will continue to advise the local communities on how we're progressing towards delivering those schemes within the overall fiscal envelope that's been estimated or close enough to it. The operations and maintenance cost of the scheme will continue to be advised to the community, and will inform the community as to any impacts and effects of any changes or any modifications to the system, but how that affects the operating costs. Individual side issues, as I said earlier, they will be dealt on a side-by-side basis, and we be working continuously with the property owners to adjust that. And also, where objections were written approval has not been obtained, that we recommend that no alterations to the system has been contemplated by the Council, but the Council endorses the installation of the step system as proposed on all properties in Rotorua. And that's it. Thank you.
Oh, I need a mover that the deliberations report East Rotorua sewage scheme objections to install a step system within properties that Council deliberates on all objections received as outlined, and having considered all objections received, that Council adopts the following recommendations as outlined. Do I have a mover? Councillor Rotorua, seconder. Do I have a Councillor Hunt? Thank you. All those in favour? No, we should ask two questions. Now. Questions. Councillor Kent, Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the things that concerns me somewhat is the fact that the objections in several cases are to the cost of the scheme and the impact of the cost of that scheme on those who are trying to budget for it, and the question as to whether in fact this is a final amount or not. And I see in here that we've discounted consideration of the cost of the scheme as being outside the scope of objections. Now, that concerns me somewhat, and I wonder whether, in fact, in view of highly advertised blowouts in expenditure from council, whether it would actually be possible to put a cap on the figure that is being proposed to those in Rotorua, so that it will be no more than, and if it does go above, then council will pick up the balance as part of the general rate. And I wonder whether that meets support from my colleagues.
It's a question to Stavros, but it's probably more to Thomas.
I would firstly respond to under the Local Government Act, with the purposes, express purposes of listening to these objections. The options in front of you at the moment is really with regards to the installation of the particular pretreatment system on a property with, the type. Well, it is the installation. The type has been decided. There's no, we can't change it at the moment. I think with regards to the funding and revenue decisions the council has made with regards to that scheme, Thomas perhaps can outline that. But before Thomas expresses, more his chief financial officer's, perspective, what I would say is that consistently we have been talking to the community about our overall efforts to work inside an envelope of the project within the $35–36 million that is the cost envelope of the scheme. We've made some good progress. Very soon you will receive a report recommending the commencement of the reticulation system for Rotorua. The balance of the estimated cost is going to be dedicated to the pre-treatment system for Rotorua. If we stay inside that cost envelope we have targeted, and what we said to the community, that every effort is being made to stay inside that $14,000–15,000 net cost for each property. However, it is important to recognize that it is a complicated project, and from time to time there are unforeseen circumstances, but nevertheless working hard in that direction. The overall principle of capping the net capital contribution to that, Thomas can have his view about it, but that is a funding and policy decision council has made.
Thanks for the clarification on what we're actually voting on today. Thomas, do you want to speak to that issue of cost?
I'd just like to support my colleague in the fact that the scheme is the cost recovery through the capital rate is in line with council's current revenue and financing policies. It's consistent with how we have gone out to the community and informed them of the scheme and of how we were going to recover the cost. I think if council were to change that and move a portion of that cost onto a set of ratepayers that haven't been previously included as those that were bearing a share of that cost, we would likely have to go out and reconsult as part of a change to our revenue and financing policy. So it's probably not something that the council could make a decision on right here and now.
Could I just ask a question around that? How many have signed up to the scheme now? Because that helps spread the cost, doesn't it?
We've got 100, and with inclusion of the property owners of Rotorua number 1, we've got about 213, we've got about 21 that haven't signed yet. We've got the balance of 190, sign authorizations, to proceed with that. But can I also suggest too is that because we continue to work to deliver a capital costs inside the envelope of the scheme, and probably will be at least another year by the time we complete Rotorua, or a bit more than that, before we know the actual costs. The debate, the discussion whether there's going to be any limit, or a ceiling to the capital contribution, by the ratepayers, I think it's premature at this point in time until it finishes the project.
Oh, I had Councillor Gould, sorry, and then over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stavros, for your report today. May I suggest with the individual side issues, with landowners, you slash trustees, Because on the list on pages 165 and 166, there are 49 property owners which haven't given written approval. Numbers 15 and 28 are dealing with estates, and number 48 is a family trust. So
I think
I just put / trustees because some of the trustees are involved in the land
I
at
get
the
your
moment.
point. Stavros, they're still a landowner, aren't they?
Yes, look, our legal responsibility is to deal with the legal representative of a property on a side-by-side basis, whether trustees or freehold, or we will work with them depending who the legal representative of the property is.
Okay. And my second question, Madam Chair, with the submission process which we heard about a month ago, have all the landowners who made the verbal submissions and written submissions going to get letters with their questions answered?
Look, Gord, that's an operational issue once we've deliberated, but it's fine for you to answer it, Stavros.
Because a lot of them are some technical questions.
If you see 2.3 in the report, it says that council communicates the results of the hearing to the objectors. Once you've made the decision today, we will go back to all the objectors and tell them, what the content of this report was and the result of the council decision.
That's page 110.
Thank you.
It's written there. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I just wanted Thomas really to clarify the issue of potential budget blowout. So this is not our first sewage scheme that we've done. And Thomas, if you could just discuss whether, when we propose those other schemes in all the other areas, whether we have been within the fiscal envelope that we have projected for that, whether there has been any unexpected, and whether we've come under. Because I think it's really important for the community to get the idea that when we go out to do these sewage schemes, we work with the best figures we have, and by and large, we have managed to keep within that financially. And it doesn't suddenly double overnight. Obviously, there can be unexpected things that turn up. But I think it's really important to clarify that when we set a budget, we give as much assurance to the community as we can prior to the beginning of it, knowing that there may be some small tweaks to that depending on what it actually turns up at. But could you clarify that, please, Thomas?
I'll just pass it to Jean-Paul, actually, because it was before my time, so he has a recollection of those previous schemes.
Thank you.
Your Worship, and I'm making eye contact across to the former chair of the Finance Committee. My understanding and my recollection was that for all of the schemes prior, we came in under the estimates, and that often gave an upside for those people who had to make those payments.
Thank you.
And also remembering it's critical here with the MOH subsidy in our last scheme. Yes. Yes.
Through the chair, the one thing I would comment on this, and Stavros has already mentioned this, is that a good substantial part of this scheme, in fact the treatment plant and a large percentage of the actual pipeline is already completed. So the costs are very much known. The only unknown at this particular time is actually the nature of the pre-treatment system for Rotorua. And that decision will be very much one that will be driven in conjunction with the community. Well, we can't provide a guarantee around that, and the reality is that it is actually open to some different options which the community are looking at.
So I'm happy that the motion goes through, but I think when the time comes to discuss the funding mechanism, that's when we need to have the debate in terms of subsidies, etc. Because I know with every other scheme we've given a $1,500 per property subsidy on the general rate part, and the MOH subsidy, Environment Bay of Plenty, often has made provision for a soft subsidy, and there's also been a deprivation subsidy. So I think once those funding mechanisms come in, I think what we're doing here today is saying that we're supporting staff to install a step system and to get on with it. But there are some things that are different with the Rotorua, Rotorua scheme that's different with the Hamarana, Oahu, Okaraka and the other schemes that we've put in, is that we've got the issue of the leaseholds. And on page 114, some of the objectors, one of the objectors was a Janine and Peter Watt, and if they sign up to pay the capital contribution over 25 years and they've only got 6 years of their lease to go, who's going to pay the other 19 years? Does that then fall with Rotorua number 1? And I mean, these are the issues that I think need to be clarified. I mean, on that page 114, it also says 11 objections were received, 150 approvals have now been received. The balance of the landowners has been 49, although 37 of these received the landowner's consent. So a leaseholder isn't a landowner, it is Rotorua number 1 trust. So they're the 37 who had to give their approval, which they have given. 49 have not signed or objected. The letters from council dated the 17th of December stated that the non-response will be taken as an objection. The 49 landowners who have either... Oh, my question is, I've done my homework, and the rates out there are between $1,800 and $14,000 per property of the 700 that are factored in the capacity of the scheme. So you add on 1,080 for the capital cost plus 450 for the operational cost year. That the average rate payer goes to nearly $5,000, and I think these are some of the concerns that we will only get when these people get their rates demands. So I just look forward to when we come up for the funding program. I mean, I'm pleased that 153 have agreed, but there is going to be some problem. There is going to be some problem with those people.
That sort of sits outside of
I
what
know
we're
it does.
agreeing
I know
today.
it does, but I just wanted to hear it today because it is under 7.1, where those people, you know, and the objections and the leasehold. I just wanted people to be aware that Rotorua number 1 trust take up the costs if the lease expires.
Well, that's not what we're discussing today, but we note your comments. Councillor Donaldson and then Rotorua Taten, back to you.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, this scheme is not unlike others, and I'm supportive of the recommendation. However, it is different to others in that the Regional Council supplied a $4 million subsidy to equalise the costs across the two schemes. So that's why, and I'm sympathetic to the Rotorua ratepayers that they're unsure of the final cost. But because of that equalisation factor, until Rotoiti is decided and built, we won't know the final figure. Stavros, my question is the rating needs to start on 1 July for Rotorua, the payment of the capital cost, either through a lump sum or through a targeted rate. And there is also a rates rebate available for people in hardship, which can be up to $600 per year. So is that the decision to invoke that, those payments, is that part of the annual plan, not this issue?
Yes, correct, Deputy Mayor. The commencement of payments for the targeted rates and the net capital contribution with the annual plan. We've got a little bit of work to do with regards to the commissioning of the treatment plan, but certainly it's the annual plan commencement. What we're saying at this point in time is that for Rotorua, the estimated cost will be charged, and we'll try hard to work in that envelope.
That's the grey area that some submitters were really concerned about. Now we have Councillor Rotorua Tate.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I think really it's been covered. It's just that if I was and thank you, and I do support the recommendation, but if I was sitting out at Rotorua, all I want to know is what's that damn thing going to cost me? It's really so. And I know I I heard you say, Stavros, the cost is a little bit premature, but that's really, I think, what most of them want to know. This year or next year, what am I up for? So,
And that's what we all heard.
yeah.
I agree. Councillor Kent, and then back to Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I realise it is outside of the scope, as has been explained, to discuss the cost, but when do we discuss the contribution?
Annual plan. Yeah. Would be. Are you answering that?
No, it's annual plan.
Annual plan. Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Stavros. During the hearings, or some of my other questions have been answered, but the one on information, some who came forward and they say, didn't know, didn't get anything, but you sort of say to yourself, hang on a minute, we've got a good department here that gets information out. Is it just one of those cases where we just leave it and say, well, no matter what we do, we get the information out by the newspapers, by email, but are we just going to have to sort of bite the bullet on criticism like that we don't get the information out? I think we do, but that's only me. And there were a couple of submitters who
Do you want that answered?
Yes, please.
Councillor Maxwell, I think from our perspective, I can assure this council that there have been extensive, efforts to communicate letters, public meetings, online newsletters, information packages. I think for someone to say that I'm unaware of what's happening is stretching credibility.
It's an interesting comment, and she's in the crowd, but the chair of the Ratepayer Group's done a remarkably good job here to try to keep everybody informed, and along with the working party. But until the rubber hits the road, it's exactly as Councillor Rowe Kawatate said, people want to know what they have to pay up front. I don't hear a lot of objections to the scheme. I didn't hear it from submitters. Councillor Donaldson.
Not a question, Madam Chair, but just a comment, is that we're now up to the third chair of the Rotorua Ratepayers Association since this journey started.
Well, there appear to be no further questions, so I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. And we now move to, and we do note that the objectives will be notified. Now we move for a resolution to go into public excluded. Do I have a mover? Yes, Councillor Maxwell, seconded. Councillor Kent, all those in favour. Oh, I should say it's a request to approve purchase of land along the Rotorua Eastern Arterial alignment, the fee increase of Waikiki Valley Thermal Pools, and 6 monthly review of the governance risk register. No, they're not. No, they're not. Yeah. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary?